as a norm in our classrooms. So I actually wanted to ask you, I apologize for not having the questions written here, but we had a little technological challenge. But I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I hope that you can all use the little function at the bottom where you have, I think it's called emotions, or is it emoticons, where you can show thumbs up. That's one response. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, how many of you consider yourselves multilinguals? Can you find this little button to react, or you can type in the chat. I can also see that. If you consider yourself, okay, I see some thumbs up. Yeah, great. We have a lot of multilinguals present here today. Oh, some people are saying no. Okay.
Yes, if you click on participants and then more, those are the buttons are there if you need to find it, the ups and downs.
Okay, great. Yeah. So we are getting mixed responses here. Some of you say only bilingual. Some of you say not multilingual, but many of you say, yes, I am a multilingual. Not fluent, but 3 languages, right? So we're not going to go into a discussion of terminology and definitions today. But according to one of the definitions, bilinguals are types of multilinguals. So a lot of you do think of yourselves as multilinguals, which is, again, pointing toward that direction. Okay, my second question is, how many of you are currently working with multilingual students? Again, you can show thumbs up or you can type yes. Yeah? Quite a few people, right? So our classrooms are becoming increasingly not only linguistically diverse, but multilingual, meaning we're working with learners who speak more than 2 languages, and they're learning English as yet another language, right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's quite a common phenomenon. And then the last question I have is, do you think you would be able to design and implement a curriculum that meets the needs of multilingual learners? How many of you feel confident doing that? Yes, yes, sure, Again, mixed responses, not yet, right? Some thumbs up, yeah. So it's great to see that many people who are present here today feel that they have sufficient knowledge and experience to be able to do that. But I hope that even if you're confident in your skills, the rest of the presentation will still be relevant to you when we talk about some ways in which we can improve these abilities. So let me talk briefly about the space for multilingualism in the curriculum. Right? We talked today about different types of curricula, recommended, written, and so on. But something that's very important to consider here is teacher beliefs. Because until teachers believe that multilingualism is something important to embrace and cultivate in the classroom, we cannot make a change towards a more multilingual curriculum, right? I don't know about you, but during this pandemic, I found an escape in fiction. And reading it, I came across this quote that I found really, really powerful and applicable to our talk today. It comes from Terry Pratchett, and it says, "Belief is one of the most powerful organic forces in the multiverse." I also like the multi here, if you note that. We're talking about multilingualism. It may not be able to move mountains exactly, but it can create someone who can. And I really see teachers as these powerful individuals who can move mountains through their actions in the classroom. We are such an important agent of change, right? So when we design curricula, we want to make this stride towards supporting multilingualism. And to do so, we of course have multiple possibilities, multiple justifications, and multiple answers. So let's take a look at where teacher beliefs come from, right? There are many sources of teacher beliefs. A lot of us have experiences as language learners ourselves, and so we go back to those when we design curricula. Also, teacher education and teaching experience impact our choices and our beliefs. And although beliefs are difficult to alter, we have some evidence showing that teacher education programs can be positive. They can make a difference. So let me give you one more quote here, and that is more directly related to curriculum design and beliefs. And it comes from Grades 2000. It's a little bit dated, but I think it still holds. The process of designing a course is one way in which you can learn to understand and articulate your beliefs, because those beliefs provide a basis for making choices, right? So this is an important consideration. We cannot design curricula oriented towards multilingual English learners until we have examined our beliefs and until our beliefs actually align with this conviction that multilingualism is something we want to cultivate, and that as English language teachers, so teachers of a very, very powerful responsibility, a very, very powerful position in the world, we have a responsibility to also give space to those other languages that our students may bring in with them to the classroom. Okay, I'm having trouble with the little arrows again. Bear with me just a sec. Here we go. Okay. So what do we know about teacher beliefs about multilingualism? There is a change taking place there as well, right? So although many teachers in their practice still support monolingual ideologies and they separate languages in instruction, so that is movements like English only, or saying in class, please only speak English, do not use other languages. And although a belief that learning the majority language as the most important goal still prevails, and that includes recommendations to parents and students to speak English at home, to not speak their home language, not speak their heritage language, but to speak English in order to practice and have the most exposure possible. Despite all of this, we see more and more positive attitudes among teachers towards multilingualism. So more and more teachers say, multilingualism is a good thing. That's something we want. It's something positive, right? Now, in the classroom, so even though you may already have this belief, actually translating it into teacher actions is a different story. It's difficult. And also, many teacher education programs do not really talk about multilingualism and how to integrate it. So many teachers acknowledge learners' multilingual competencies, but don't really draw on them for instruction. Or if they do so, they don't do it systematically, right? It's often done in an ad hoc manner, so a little bit here, a little bit there, but not really as a pedagogy. And in classrooms where translanguaging is practiced, it tends to be restricted to the majority language rather than also engaging learners' home languages. So this comes from contexts where English is taught as a foreign language, where children are learning the majority language of the country, like in Finland, for instance. They're learning English as a third language, and then at home they speak it another language. So to address this clear need to empower teachers to actually implement multilingual curricula, Dr. Christensen and myself have been working on a tool, on something that helps teachers implement multilingualism in practice, not just talking about it in theoretical terms, not looking at research, but actually what can we do in the classroom to implement it. So today the tool has other applications as well, but today we're going to talk about implementing it as a tool for instructional design. And because we're running out of time, I will have to go through the next slides quite quickly and only discuss a few examples, but we will send you a PDF version of the PowerPoint afterwards, or we'll send it to Mac and then he can distribute it to all of the participants. So we call the tool Multilingual Approach to Diversity in Education, MADE for short, and It consists of the following indicators. We look at classroom as a multilingual space. We look at interaction and grouping configurations, teacher language use and learner language use, language and culture attitudes, metacognition and metalinguistic awareness, teaching materials, and multiliteracy. So I'm going to go through each of these indicators in turn and provide some examples of specific features associated with them. And so on each screen, you will see several examples of features, but because of the time restriction, I will only speak about one of them as an example. The arrows, I'm sorry about the delay again. Here we go. Okay, so the first indicator is classroom as a multilingual space. And essentially, when you're designing your curriculum, when you're designing your course, we want you to think about how your classroom spaces can reflect the linguistic and cultural diversity of the students. So how can we, for instance, organize wall displays where students' languages become more visible? Or can we put up different flags or have a theme maybe on different countries and cultures and languages that students bring in with them, right? So that's one consideration. And students should be given a chance also to participate in the design of these spaces. As the next component to consider when designing your curriculum, we want you to think about how students interact together and how they're put into groups, right? And that is something you're already thinking about a lot, right? When you organize pair work, when you put them in small groups. So now an additional factor to consider is what languages do students speak at home? What linguistic resources do they have? And how can we create groups or pairs in a way that really monopolizes on these resources, on these languages they bring in? Could they be put together in pairs as learning buddies so that a student who is a newcomer is placed with somebody who actually speaks their home language, who can help them and guide them in this particular activity, right? Or perhaps in some other activities, you actually want to put them in diverse groups so that they do not share their first languages, so that they can either teach each other about how things are translated in different languages, or you just want them to use English in that particular context. The next issue to consider is how we use language as teachers. And so one factor that we find important is that teacher acts as a model multilingual. Now remember when I asked you earlier how many of you actually consider themselves multilinguals, and some of you said, no, I think I'm a monolingual, or I'm just a bilingual. So the challenge here is to think about how you can still act as someone who supports multilingualism, even if you yourself do not think you're a multilingual, right? This is the biggest challenge, but it can be done through promoting positive attitudes towards multilingualism and acknowledging that, yes, this is a norm, showing interest in the languages that students speak, and maybe positioning yourself as an emergent multilingual. So somebody who is curious in other languages, right? Somebody who's trying to just learn a few words in the languages that your students speak at home. How do you say hello in Arabic? Or how do you say good morning in Chinese? Let's all learn these words. Let's all become more open to the linguistic diversity that we have in the classroom. This, of course, is very closely linked to the languages to the languages that our students use and how they use them. So although we still want to maximize the amount of input that students receive in English, that doesn't mean that other languages have to be left outside of the classroom door, right? Because if you think about language knowledge as sort of background knowledge, and I think we would all agree that new learning happens by making connections to the previous knowledge we have, it becomes pretty obvious that students can learn a new language by making links to the languages that they already know, that this is an important and valuable resource, and if you abandon it, you're well, you're depriving them of something that could be very, very helpful